In a dying world, a grouping of humans are left to survive within an underground town. As time passes and generations die, the people no longer remember the reason they belong to this city, passing their purposeless days towards their inevitable deaths. A banished generation that struggles to find a meaning to their lives. The principles at the center of Texhnolyze make it a true successor to the author's preceding project, Serial Experiments Lain. It holds the same dark, existential rabbit hole, yet somehow deepens the idea tortured minds create the greatest of stories. This tale, and the conclusion we're led to arrive to, can be seen as nihilistic in a sense. Yet what you'll realize by the end is Texhnolyze is a response to nihilism, not a story supporting it. There's no divine meaning to life, but there are infinite amount of meanings to give life. But no meaning truly matters in light of what drives us all from the day we are born to this world, before we can even think to give meanings to our long lives. The will to survive. The innate instinct in all living creatures that many are unsatisfied with and resort to the unending pursuit to assign something more profound to our existence. That kind of worldview is what Texhnolyze desires to explore, and by the end, through the stories of the residents to this dying planet, you'll realize as I did what it truly means to be alive. For it isn't as simple as living or dying. In an effort to make sense of the philosophy and story of Texhnolyze, we'll start at the very beginning of this world's slow march to extinction. We must first understand why the subterranean city of Lux was created. On the surface, humans could be grouped into two categories: the pacifist and the bellicist, an advocate for violence. Tired of the damage the Bellas spread across the land, and afraid that this violence would be the end of their species, they forced those who wore the monster within on their sleeves into the underground. However, they didn't send them without a purpose. Facing the crisis of extinction, humanity was desperate to find any way to continue living, and a very common thought was that evolving into a higher life form was necessary to avoid annihilation from disease, violence, or disaster. They may be banishing those with malicious intent, but that is only part of the problem. The people sent underground were tasked with the duty to harvest a resource known as raffia, a flower that grows within these caverns. It had been discovered that this flower had the ability to assist in the process of pairing cybernetic limbs to a human, allowing those who had lost vital parts of their body to become whole once again. This was a revolutionary finding, but it wasn't enough to save their species. As the pacifists sent these people down into the underground, they also sent their hopes for steps forward. As the trains of people disappeared into the darkness of the tunnels, the surface dwellers would soon realize the fates they damned themselves to by sending these people away may be much worse. Most of the mechanics behind the city of Lux were already decided upon before sending the violent crowd. Since their core purpose was to mine raffia, they needed a way to control the population and prevent them from acting out as they did on the surface. They found that if they kept a day-night cycle within these caverns, the people would perform more naturally and less like primal animals. And so a light switch was installed that operated the skybox surrounding the city. Someone was needed to operate these controls as well as monitor the progress of the citizens of Lux. The pacifists tasked a group the sole duty of overseeing Lux, bestowing them with the title Class, a group that was treated both as god and royalty by the people of Lux, and their myth and legend only grew as generations passed. The class can be seen as the first acting organization of Lux. Existing from the beginning, this group would choose not to intervene with the going-ons of the city. Their duty was merely to maintain the day-night cycle and ensure the Lux people were doing their duty of mining. The class's role would be passed on through lineage, and through selective breeding, they would create a being befitting to be called their leader. A child was born, given the name Kano. This boy was rather strange from the beginning. He was a solipsist, a person who only believes their mind exists, and everything outside the mind is uncertain to be real. In short, he was a tad deranged. Kano also suffered a birth defect, likely deriving from the fact their selective breeding didn't take into account the fact they were interbreeding, thus he was born without legs. While for us this may seem like a terrible fate, in this world, a highly advanced science called technoloization exists. The attachment of cybernetic limbs that function relatively the same to normal limbs, albeit with more power. This was not the original plan to replace Kano's legs, as they had a boy from Lux relatively Kano's age donate his legs, but for reasons unknown to us, Kano eventually got rid of these in favor for Texhnolyze technology. Using the essence of the raffia flowers mentioned before, these robotic limbs would be fused with the patient's nervous system and allow control of the metal. A side effect of this treatment was a UI would be forcibly installed into your nervous system. For a few hours following, your vision is heavily skewed. Eventually the UI in your nervous system would mesh, making you able to monitor the status of your Texhnolyze limbs within your vision. This technology seemed incredibly unnatural, especially to the people of Lux. There were varying reactions to the introduction of such technology, which led to the various schools of thought being created. One of the first organizations to spring up after the settlement of Lux was the people of Gabe. This group lived in the outskirts of Lux in the mountains, closer to the doors within the hills that led to the class. This was the Lux people's first attempt at self-governance, and the Gabe people resembled the more spiritual nature of early civilizations. Given the close proximity to the class, the people of Gabe became like their proxy. Seeing the chance to indirectly control them, they selectively bred a prophet they would send to Gabe every generation. This person would be able to see the future, and the Gabe would give this person the title of seer. The seer's word was law in the Gabe tribe, and whatever fate they prophesized would tell them how they should move forward. But given this more spiritual approach to order and law, as well as their location and relation to the city, a true system of order needed to be created, one that could bring order to a densely populated urban sprawl. Initially, a government system like we know was established, but it was far too easily corrupted. Annoyed with the state of the Union, a man would create an organization, protect the people of Lux, and instill some form of order across the city. That man would create the organization, named the Organ, attaining the title of Great Father as its founder. The Organ grew extremely powerful within the city, wresting control away from the government, eventually causing its collapse. Whether this was a good or a bad thing for Lux, we'll never really know, as this is the only reality there is. The Organ operated similarly to the Yakuza. They provided protection to the areas they controlled for a small tax. Given their strength, the Organ was treated as the acting body of order. However, there was a faction that challenged their power. Based off of the reception of technolization, while the Organ accepted this advancement in technology, others rejected it. A group would be founded under the oath, mind, body, truth, salvation, vengeance. This chant would double as the battle cry for their mission, to eliminate technolization from society. The Salvation Alliance believes cybernetics to be deriving humanity of what makes them human. They believe it not only negatively affects your body, but taints your soul as well, strips you of what makes you human. Their organization doubles as a religious cult, a workers' union, and a rebel alliance. They hold their beliefs as the sole truth to the world. Their ranks are made primarily up of the working class of Lux, and they are in constant conflict with the Organ due to their acceptance of technolization. While their territory is not as large as the Organ, they have a major advantage by appealing to the labor masses. Its flag's ties to the communist working class groups, just one of many subtle nods to how it's structured. These two factions hold a large majority of the power within the city of Lux, though there is one final group that plays on the lesser scene. Born from the younger generation who desires greater freedom than what's allowed in organizations like Organ and the Union. Rakan was founded on the principle that you can come and go from the group as you please. This ideal is widely why the Rakan are not as powerful on a citywide scale, as they lack any set values or ideals to uphold. Their belief that we should all be free to do as we please is a pipe dream that would cause chaos in a city. It's likely no coincidence their name derives from the term Raka, a derogatory insult used in ancient Middle East to call someone empty-headed or a fool. Rakan's ideology is a stereotype of early teen principles, of how the young and inexperienced believe should be the way of the world. But when you grow up, you realize to have order, something more concrete and harsh, is a necessary chain to protect the freedoms we do allow. With these three organizations holding various parts of the city, and the people of Gabe nestled in the mountains near the class, the underground hierarchy is set up, and our story, the tale of a prized fighter turned protector, can begin. The boy we come to know as Ichise is heavily troubled, losing his father at a young age after he was killed for selling out his fellow comrades, who were selling raffia under the nose of the class, and his mother, who killed herself after her husband's death. He was left alone in this world. As a way to make money and release his frustrations with the world, Ichise would become a prize fighter, and a particularly good one at that. As a result, for a recent win, the owner buys him a cheap escort, and while they do their business, likely in frustration that the boy has this cold look of a dead man, she attempts to gorge his eye. This awakens some kind of rage in Ichise, decking the woman and leaving the scene. The club owner is pissed at the boy for damaging his goods, and so he calls upon the lawmakers of Lux, Organ, to set the boy straight. Ichise knows what is to come, Arming himself, he tries to fight off the organ, but he stands no chance against their sheer numbers. The men hold him down as one of them lops off his arm as atonement for his damage to the woman. She stands behind the men, smiling as Ichise screams in agony. The blood rushes from his body, but the pain only makes the adrenaline flow to his head more. And the only thing he knows how to do is fight. Like a wounded beast, he stares into the night sky, moaning in pain, until everything becomes red. He locks eyes on his prey, the petty woman still standing there grinning. He makes a dash for her, only to find himself swept off his feet. As he lies on the ground, writhing in pain, the organ men look down upon him like a wounded stray dog. They ponder what they should do to him next, when luckily the head of organ, Onishi, makes an appearance. On his drive home, he spotted the scene and came to dismiss his men from toying with a beaten animal. He makes a point by shooting near Ichise's head, as if the head of organ is sparing this life. The lowers would be fools to take this any further. They all leave, as the stray is left in a world of pain. In unison with Ichise's fight with the organ, the Union launches an ambush on the stage of Gabe, chanting their motto, mind, body, truth, salvation, vengeance. It's clear, as was the situation with the organ, these are the lowers in the Salvation Alliance that act rashly without the approval of their leader. They attack the sage out of the belief it will make their ideals more solidified in the city landscape. They are, however, killed, the sage being saved by a lone traveler who came from outside the cavern walls. A traveler going by the name Yoshi. As a thanks for saving his life, the sage has the Gabe seer, Nan, escort Yoshi into town. He explains to the man Nan can see the future, though it is not concrete, as the future is fluid and ever-changing in form. On the train, Yoshi asks the girl if she's seen his future. She nods in confirmation. He has but one request for her: to never tell anyone, including himself, what his future holds. She nods once more in agreement, as the mystery of Yoshi continues to grow. From the streets of Lux to this highly advanced lab, a strange wake-up for someone like Ichise who was near moments from death not too long ago. His will to live had brought him from the old factory district to the center of town, where Dr. Kamata found him clutching to life. Under her care, his body is able to recenter itself, but this wasn't done out of the sheer kindness in her heart. What she saw in this boy was the innate instinct to live, and for what? She isn't too sure herself, but a man with this kind of will makes the perfect experiment. Kamata had begun work on a new form of technolyzed limbs, one she describes as the most advanced of anything available within Lux. For a person of Ichise's status, this charity would be out of reach for him to obtain on his own. Only the rich and powerful could afford such advanced technolyzation. It's a give-take relationship. Ichise tests something new for her. In return, he receives a functioning body once more. Despite the pros outweighing the cons, the boy does not want her charity nor robotic limbs. He sees these cybernetics as depraved of humanity, but he doesn't really get a choice here. He's an experiment after all. His attempts to lash out at Kamata are met with the back of a sword coming down on his skull. Onishi has come to visit the doctor, his legs malfunctioning after an attempt on his life. The Salvation Union lowers had attempted an assassination on the organ leader, and that can't be ignored. After having the doctor fix his technolyzed legs, he pays a visit to the leader of the Union, Genji Kimata. The two discuss in private the events, Genji apologizing for the rash actions of the lowers in his union. They negotiate a non-aggression agreement. Despite their differing ideals for the future of Lux, the spillage of blood would not solve anything. They both wish the best for the city, they just have different principles of what is best. Onishi leaves the Union headquarters, stressed and in need of comfort. He turns to his assistant, Michiko Hirota, for his wife has lost touch with reality and no longer associates with the real world. It's clear Ichise's rejection of the surgery will not be taken into account. The machines work tirelessly, connecting metal with flesh, nerve endings meeting tiny metal pins. Upon full attachment, Ichise's vision becomes blurred as the UI adapts to his body. Unwilling to wait for it to finish, the boy gets up from the table while Kamata is distracted on the phone. He takes his frustration out on the table, repeatedly smashing his hand into the metal. Yet it doesn't hurt nor bleed. This robotic metalwork is not his hand. He refuses to accept it. He takes his leave from the laboratory, hating what he has become. Kamata is left alone, pondering why the man she gifted with the ability to once again walk and hold things despises the tools that allow him to do so. It's more complicated the mind of Ichise, than we could at first imagine. Through the petty theft of his bag, Yoshi has stumbled upon the young Raken gang. Their leader Shinji is the most put together of the bunch, keeping a cool head in intense situations. To apologize for the trouble his lowers have caused, he invites Yoshi to their bar. With the help of this visit, Yoshi has collected quite a lot of intel about the town of Lux, describing himself as a traveler from above. He doesn't say much about the world above ground besides comparing the sad state of Lux here as somewhat better than up there. While the people of Lux cling to what little life they have, the common man barely keeping themselves afloat. Above, the will to persevere is all but lost. Sitting upon the rooftop, looking over the city, Shinji joins the traveler. They discuss the inner workings of the three major factions of Lux. Shinji, claiming the organ and union, chain their members to a set of rules, while the Raken live completely free of the shackles of responsibility. But Yoshi points out that which he cannot see.
本当の自由は何にもよりかかれない。それは儚く、寂しく、険しい。君はさっき何にも属さないって言ったけど、それは嘘だ。君はこの町に属している。間違いなく君の自由もな。
Yoshi knows something Shinji doesn't. He knows exactly what the outside world is like, and how the way the Raken is couldn't exist without this city in its current state. Thus, their freedom is chained to it, as are they. The idea of us having access to true freedom is a well-fed lie. We hear it said to us time and time again, yet it's never rang out as true. There isn't a place on this planet where you can be completely free, liberated from rules and order. Even Raken itself, a self-proclaimed free spirit group, has some form of order, as they have declared Shinji their leader. True freedom can't lean on anything. As long as there's consequences to your actions, you'll never truly be free. As a member of any society, you are only granted certain freedoms, while you're forced to follow certain rules. Yoshi despises the chains that have been put on humans. He sees their original selves, the primal animals, as our true form, hunting and killing in jungles before they became concrete. He desires to bring back the true nature of humans, the animal we all pretend we're not by dressing up in fancy suits and assigning grander purposes to our actions. Yoshi plots a grand spectacle to show the people of Lux the reality of their town they've forgotten after generations. He speaks with a prostitute about the town, gathering further information on the factions and how they interact, before killing her along with her pimp. The cards have been dealt. It's time he begins his little game. Ichise's run-in with a seer was short-lived. Kamata had called Onishi and asked him to find and return Ichise to her. He sends the lowers to look for him, but they have plans of their own. The same group that had beaten and mutilated the stray dog find him once again. Refusing to rely on his metal limbs to defend himself, he's once more beaten and tossed into the sewers. A labyrinth they hope he starves within. What their boss doesn't know, they can't be held accountable for. After hours of wandering, Ichise is able to find an exit thanks to Lain dropping raffia flowers downstream, leading him to a door with metal bars. He initially tries to break them with his hand of flesh, but comes to the realization the only way he'll be able to survive is if he relies on the foreign metal that are his new arm and leg. He accepts the reality of his form, if only a little, and tears off an iron bar, allowing him to escape. Onishi is considered special by the people of Lux. At a young age, he heard the city speak to him, and since then, he's been devoted to ensuring the organ maintains a sense of order. It's said only those that have been technolyzed with synthetic limbs have the opportunity to hear the city speak. Even so, Onishi is the only one we know of that has encountered this voice. It's uncertain if this idea he's special contributed to his wife's crawl into madness, as on this morning, she's convinced the city is talking to her from the phone, despite it not even being plugged in. Onishi still loves his wife, even in madness. He takes care to ensure her safety and well-being. It's a shame, though, she couldn't hold on to her mind. Having accepted his body, Ichise can properly retaliate against the men who took an arm and a leg. Despite the fact his actions could carry stiff consequences for assaulting an organ member, Ichise isn't the type to think in terms of consequence. He simply acts on his instincts. Over these events, the sage narrates that the people of Lux once had eyes similar to his, likely a nod to Ichise's current state being much like the original cavern dwellers. quick to react with violence. Members of higher standing stumble upon the scene and actually follow the orders to capture Ichise alive, taking him to a holding cell and contacting Onishi along with the doctor, who's patiently waiting for good news regarding her lab experiment. The doc seems to be wavering with a sense of purpose. Her experiments are her meaning to life. They are what pushes her to continue living. She had chastised Ichise for trying to throw his life away in her lab, and this likely speaks of her own mental state as well. She's obsessed with further evolving Texhnolyze technology. Ichise an example of that. She's spoken of her origins from within the class on the top of the hill, having left in the pursuit of meaning and greater scientific discoveries down on the streets of Lux. She had found that and been able to progress her research in this place of chaos. Within the class, there was no opportunity to grow, as everything remained still. Their values, their ideals, their growth, their lives. Here in the streets where people fight to survive, humans must adapt, accept new methods to gain an edge, to stay useful, which has led to the state of things as they stand. A city where the bar for survival is constantly being raised creates a stronger, faster, smarter, and more advanced civilization. Visiting Ichise, Kamada asks to be left alone where she finishes the fitting of his arm and leg casing, making them look more human-like. He lies there, rather unresponsive to any dialogue Kamada tries to start with him. He's let free, Onishi and Kamata, left to ponder what allows the boy to go on living. With his parents dead and no meaningful connections, he just trots along the streets living a hollow existence, but with a will to live at the same time. The instinct to live that's in all living things, is that truly enough to live a fulfilling life? Or do we need more to truly be what we consider human? Without anything to instill meaning, Ichise still clings to life, but he may as well be halfway into the grave. He is devoid of meaning, living only to live, but there's hope in that all the same. If you live long enough, something nice is bound to happen. No matter if connection is lost, you may stumble into others you'll gain affection for. Lain becomes that for him, the girl seemingly engrossed in his continued march forward, watching over him, providing him with those feelings he felt he'd never experience again. Compassion for a human life. Onishi may be the head of Organ's organization, but that doesn't make him a tyrannical ruler. Similar to mafia systems, there are different offices that make up the greater organization, each with their own appointed boss. These offices all look to Onishi's leadership as the head one, but they too have voting power and influence within Organ. Despite the recent non-aggression deal Onishi had negotiated with Genji of the Union, the lowers of each faction don't always follow protocol. They continue to fight with each other, and with the pressure from the other offices building for Onishi to start a war, he tries one more hand at peace talks, sending a head of an office on his behalf. Only the man never reaches the meeting grounds. There couldn't be any greater spark for full conflict. Onishi can't ignore this action, but it also stinks of conspiracy. He doesn't believe Genji is stupid enough to want war. They had both talked of their shared devotion to the city and desire to avoid conflict. The other office bosses remain in ignorance, playing to the tune of the one behind the assassination. The information of the murder quickly leaks as Yoshi spreads misinformation that the Union was responsible, hoping this will continue to fan the flame of war. The lowers are riled and attack without permission, driving a truck of gasoline straight into the Union Hall, burning their headquarters to ash. Yoshi then calls the Organ meeting room, posing as the Union, declaring the attack an act of war, but Onishi sees straight through the lies. The Organ head is left with a great mess to clean up, but it's quite likely this conflict has already become a fire he's incapable of putting out. The future of Lux may be out of his hands. There's far too much pent-up rage between the factions. A simple false info drop that the Union believed the Rockkin were responsible for the bombing, and a well-placed car bomb, rendering many dead or injured, is enough to get the Rockkin fired up and inserting themselves into the faction conflict. Yoshi has well thought this out, but this gang warfare is only the beginning of his plan to liberate Lux and reveal what stands behind the smoke and mirrors. Rockkin sets out to interrupt the scheduled meeting between the Union and Organ as Yoshi gets into position. As atonement for their actions, Onishi had his assistant strip the men involved in the attack of their Texhnolyze limbs, delivering them in a bucket to Genji as an olive branch. But they've moved past the point where simple courtesies could prevent a war. They both know it. Their members are too hot-headed to see past the obvious conspiracy to cause conflict. This has grown far bigger than the two of them. Rockkin appears in the meeting grounds, raising the tensions further and ensuring there's no room for peace talks. But what sets off the war isn't either of these three leaders, rather a stray prize fighter, still wrestling with the animal instinct that's been taking over his mind. He throws himself at Shinji, attempting to attack him, when one of the Rakken tried to shoot him, missing and hitting a Union member. Ichise becomes everything the Lux once were, slaughtering any human in eyesight. There's no malice, no hatred, not even intent or purpose behind his eyes. Just pure primal instinct to kill. There's a demon inside, and he continues to lose his fight to it. As the violence comes to an end, Onishi, the only representative of Organ present, survive the onslaught, and he attempts to get Onichise, lost in existential dread, to flee with him. His assistant brings the car around, and the two disappear from the scene. Yoshi can't afford to let Onishi escape, as he has the capabilities to unite people under ideals. If he desires unchecked animalistic behavior from humans, allow mankind to once more fight for survival and continue to evolve, creating more tools and methods to kill and defend, he must eliminate those that could create order. He lies in wait, taking several shots at the car only to miss each time. He'll have to get to the man a different way, though part of his job has already been done for him. One of the office heads have taken Onishi's seat and has become acting leader, viewing Onishi as too soft for wanting to avoid conflict. As warfare populates the streets of Lux, all Yoshi must do is keep the momentum moving. Hoping to get his wife out of harm's way, Onishi calls their home. Oh, it's already too late. Yoshi picks up the phone, egging Onishi on. Despite the situation, Mana still wears the same cheap grin, no sign of real emotion behind those eyes. Yoshi attempts to force Onishi into the open so he can eliminate him, but things go south rather quickly. Mana tries to attack Yoshi, the man swatting her aside. Organ members show up with the intent to kill Onishi when he arrives to receive credit from their new boss, only to find a traveling man brandishing a gun. A shootout breaks out, Mana fatally wounded in the crossfire. By the time Onishi arrives, it's already too late, and his wife lays there dead. Despite his best efforts to ensure her safety, in the end, he couldn't do anything to help her, just as he never could. The faction conflict was only the first phase of Yoshi's spectacle, as he calls it. He still has to do something about those that pull the strings from the outside, precisely the class. To force the class to join the war, he intends to assassinate one of their own, who's currently meeting with the sage of Gabe about the rising tensions within the city. Yoshi had visited Shinji at Rakken, convincing the boy to accompany him to the meeting grounds. The desire here is to show Shinji he plans to kill a member of the class, hoping then he would understand Yoshi's goal of creating a world without chained freedom. Shinji would then choose to take the blame for the shooting, causing the class to enter the war to kill the Rakken. However, Shinji disappoints the man. Seeing what he's about to do, he points a gun at Yoshi, telling him to take the role upon himself. But due to his origins being outside these caverns, he can't bring this world into reality without using the people from here. He can be a puppeteer, but not the puppet itself. He needs Shinji, but even without him agreeing to help, he has to continue this momentum he's built. A man with similar origins as Yoshi, yet with a different way of living, Tatsuya Sakimura, points a gun at Shinji, allowing Yoshi to take the shot. The man seems to understand Yoshi's goals, even if he is a little hesitant in the ways he goes about achieving them. As he pulls the trigger, Onishi dives in to save the class member. Shinji uses this opportunity to flee the scene, Yoshi moving into the building below to finish his work. He and Onishi break into a fight, Yoshi taking the advantage, and as he's about to end Onishi's life, Ichise delivers a blow, knocking Yoshi off several stories to the pavement. With this fall, he barely clings to life, crawling across the dirt to a place we do not know. Tatsuya stands over the man, noting he must be tired of trying to bring about his dream of a perfectly free world. Yoshi can barely move to respond, so he puts down the wounded animal before returning to his job as a trained engineer, a life he was perfectly content with before Yoshi had arrived to force him to contribute to his plan. Despite their similar origins, Tatsuya didn't need to push humanity to continue to improve. He was fine if it stood still, satisfied enough with the Lux people's mindsets in comparison with the surface. Up above, time marched as they spent their lives still. No ambitions or satisfaction could be found anywhere. Yoshi despised the society above and wanted a world the complete opposite. While Lux may have been a place meeting halfway between his dreams and the surface, it held the same stagnation he feared. He died a martyr for societal change through violence, though his ideals would remain alive. There is another man that would pick up where he left off. Under the leadership of the trigger-happy office head, Organ had become more like a joke than the sophisticated organization it tries to be. Yet given Onishi's freshly split gut, he cannot retake power just yet. The Great Father tells Onishi to lay low while he recovers. The organ isn't so valuable it's worth risking the life of a natural-born leader. Ichise loiters around the organ headquarters, almost like a dog who has found shelter. Given the boy looks like he has nothing better to do, an office head that backs Onishi asks Ichise to work on finding the culprit of a recent bombing, along with Toyama, one of his men, though it's obvious the relationship is a little more than that. The hope is that the bomber will expose who paid them to set one off at the obelisk mining site. Given the importance of this section of the city, especially to Organ as it gives them control of the raffia mining industry, it's compromising for the city if the industry falls behind production. Controlling the supply chain is of the utmost importance to Organ, and the fact that it has been endangered by an office head who is anti-Onishi to create a reason to remove him from power is unacceptable. The pro-Onishi heads hoped to prove the acting leader had intentionally caused the bombing to shift Organ into a more antagonistic direction when it comes to ruling the city. Through information gathering and Toyama sleeping with his father, and I mean that quite literally, they find the bomber. Now, taking a step back, let me address the elephant in the room. Toyama is set up as a character that will do anything to survive. He does what it takes to get what he needs or get a place amongst the most powerful organization in the city. To him, giving his body is a mean worth the ends. It's tragic, but it's his way of surviving by any means, regardless of the emotional toll. He and Ichise are alike in being strays that look for a place to call home, but Toyama will always follow power at the cost of sacrifice, while Ichise follows his heart in pursuit of a duty and meaning. They take the bomber to the organ chair meeting, exposing the one who attempted to take Onishi's seat as leader as the one behind the bombing. We can assume he's killed for his crimes, and Onishi is reinstated without lifting a finger, all thanks to Ichise. As a gift of their support and as an apology, Ichise is gifted to Onishi. The man is puzzled by why the boy would come here willingly, asking if he really doesn't care about being given away like some slave. He states he doesn't really have anywhere to go. If he leaves, he'd just go wandering the streets yet again with no purpose to his life. It's not that he couldn't do that, as Onishi says he's free to go if he pleases. It's that he doesn't want to walk through life with no purpose to his name. Left to his own devices, with no reason behind his actions, he acted more animal than human. He wants the sense of duty to ground himself in his actions, something that points him towards what he should do and what he should fight for. Organ, more specifically Onishi, can give him that, so he's taken under the man's wing. As he leaves the hospital, Ichise finally sees Ran for the first time since the beginning of the faction conflict. But as of now, she wants nothing to do with him. He's rather confused and hurt by this. Ran is one of the few he respects, but she simply says she no longer wishes to see the future, and it seems Ichise's future scares her the most. She distances herself from him, talking of how nothing changes in this world, and more specifically this city, something she's begun to lament about after the death of Yoshi. As the city resettles into the way of things, Lux society once more stagnating, a new plot to transform the world begins. There's still a large mystery around Ichise's family, and even though the efforts here to reveal some form of history, what we know remains rather murky. Through investigating the murder of a dig site overseer, we learn that Ichise's father was one himself, an old man who recognizes Ichise as his father's boy. Tells him his pop was likely framed for selling out some of the miners who were selling part of the raffia's supply under the table. He had not blown the whistle on them, for he knew what would happen to the miners if he did, precisely what happened to the murdered overseer, who was doing exactly that. His father cared about his people, but it seems someone amongst the working class crowd had different morals. The ties of the assassin to this man, along with his dad, are unknown, and while there is talk about the Union sending them, it becomes clear that's not the case. This leaves only the class and moles within the mining industry as probable suspects. Likely the same people who murdered Ichise's father and once framed for the crime his mother, who knew him to be innocent, killed by the miners to cover their tracks. While Ichise acts rather stoic in light of this news, when he and Toyama go to interrogate one of the people involved in framing these overseers, the ambiance of the fight club they're in, along with the built-up hatred, causes Ichise to lash out, once more entering that primal rage state, brutalizing the man that got his mother and father killed. His mind comes back too, his face coated in blood, a corpse lying in front of him. He knows he's fucked up, but at the same time, the vengeance feels so enticing, yet also hollow. Because of his connections to Organ, Ichisei's actions now carry weight behind them, whether they are positive or negative. What he does represents the organization as a whole, and lashing out in rage cannot be tolerated. His close tie to Onishi lets him escape punishment just this once, but Toyama tells the boy to learn to control his rage and think through his actions before he commits them. He becomes a full-fledged member of the organization, and to ensure he doesn't act out of line while he acclimates, Onishi has the boy shadow him as they travel to Gabe to seek advice from the sage on what they should do for the city. While it has mostly recovered from the major conflict, there is still something off. The sage instructs Onishi to go through the seer ritual, where Lain tells him of his fate along with the cities. She gets halfway through, telling Onishi of his inevitable death in the ruins of the city, his legs contributing to his end, but she stops there, not wanting to see any more of the carnage that awaits Lux. Lain has not accepted her duty as seer. She rejects the responsibility and the severe burden that seeing the end of times brings. Often she refuses to look into the future, as is made clear from her distancing from Ichisei. His future was full of death, sorrow, and loneliness, so she indirectly rejects him along with that future. Despite what may lie in wait for him, Ichisei continues to move forward. The weight of death follows everyone in life, and he doesn't let it rule his actions. He discovers a large weapon cache in the Gabe factory while Onishi is undergoing the ritual. He reports his findings, and the Gabe people offer them no reasoning for why they are mass-producing these weapons. It's clear very quickly who these are for, but Onishi must confirm it before jumping to conclusions. The class is not a force to be reckoned with. Ichisei has the idea they ask the buyers directly, so they stow away in one of the delivery trucks. As they await to arrive at the drop-off point, Onishi tells Ichisei about how he gave up his legs for the prince of the class. Though he was majorly coerced into giving them up, he doesn't regret his actions, as these cybernetics are the reason he can hear the voice of the city. Though this mystic voice remains a mystery for some time longer, it's clear its words are what so strongly motivate Onishi to protect and maintain order, even through the grief of losing his wife. The voice of Lux is his god, his purpose, his guide, all wrapped into one. As the pair arrive at the drop-off point, it becomes clear that the situation is more complicated than imagined. Opening the back flap is one of their own, an older gentleman that was recruited to the organ, who tells them he had to become a mole. As he gets older, in Lux society, he'll slowly lose his purpose and be pushed out until there's nothing left for him. The older he gets in a place like Oregon, the less useful he becomes. Soon he won't be worth the food they feed him. But his client can offer him the strength to remove his handicap of age. His words are confusing at this moment, but as the class's plan plays out, it becomes clear what he means. The man attempts to execute the pair, but Ichisei is able to save Onishi's life yet again and disarm their attacker. The Gabe people won't stop them from getting any more information out of the man, telling the pair to stay out of Gabe business. Onishi thinks it's best they pull back for now, as Lain leaves Ichisei with the final words she'll directly speak to him.
あなたは全てを壊してしまう。あなたは人をいっぱい傷つける。あなたは最後にたった一人。
The city of Lux has some representation to the Buddhist faith. It acts as an allegory for the cycle of rebirth, the city constantly finding itself in conflict, only to destroy itself and build anew. Nothing ever changes, as Lain says, and this bothers the prince of the class. Kano believes it necessary to create great carnage, ripping apart ruling systems like Oregon and the Union for humanity to escape this constant cycle of life and destruction. To this ruler, it's not about whether the people in his kingdom want change, it's that they must go through it. Anyone preventing change should be eliminated. He and Yoshi hold the same belief that violence is necessary for evolution, and thus he prepares for war. The greatest threat to his ambition isn't Oregon or the Union, but Onishi himself, and so he's begun to chip away at the people around him, recruiting those within these organizations to his side. If Onishi represents the stagnation of normality, the comfort of the unchanging, Kano represents the new ideas and ways of life that arise from chaos and desolation. Finding himself back where his new life began, after Onishi asked him to check on the doctor, Ichisei is forced to undergo what Kamada calls evolution. What changes between before and after the process isn't all that clear. From what she says, it's as if his cybernetic limbs have become more than just replacements. It's as if they've fully become his, not just in body, but in mind and spirit as well. Before starting this rushed evolution surgery, Kamada had investigated another strange shipment program the class had started, of taking in scrap Techhnolyze parts. Drawing her own conclusions with this information, she believes they're trying to perform more Techhnolyze surgeries, and believing that her work has been complete within Lux. Having created a more evolved human being, Ichise her proof, she decides to return to the hills. Doc collects her research and test subject and goes to the door within the hills. But somewhere along the way, Kamada arrived at the wrong conclusion, both about her purpose being sent to Lux, and the motivations the class has in collecting scrap. A small orb attempts to kill her, Ichise saving her before she can be disintegrated. Being rejected by her origins, Kamada is left without purpose. She was sent to create an evolved being, was she not? Why does the class refuse to take her back? They're attacked once again by a hodgepodge of gang members, more moles from the class, Ichise killing each one, taking the doctor back to her lab. She questions what reason there is to continue living. Her work was everything, and now not even the purpose behind it remains. Ichise comforts Kamada, for the first time showing some form of compassion. He tells her not everything is gone, yet she doubles down, saying it soon will. She now realizes the goals of the class lie in creating their own evolved life form. Hers was not good enough. Across town, sightings of large white figures have skyrocketed. It's said that those who see them are led astray, members of every faction going missing, some reappearing only to act out against those who were once comrades. Such an event takes place at an organ funeral, a missing member opening fire at those carrying the casket. These urban legends of ghosts can no longer be ignored. They need to understand the bigger picture. No one's hit quite as hard by the ghost as Rakan, as their organization is built around the idea of the freedom to leave. Hal organizes a large immigration from the gang. His headspace makes him a perfect target for the ghost, as he's tempted by the idea of desertion, feeling out of place after a love triangle involving him and Shinji along with a girl Yoko grows sour. The ghosts are able to take advantage of those who lack purpose or feel inferior by offering them a new identity, one that promises them greater strength, freedom, and opportunity. As Hal takes his leave, he tells Shinji the next time they meet, he'll kill the man he once called friend. Desertion isn't the only card the ghosts play. They've also inserted themselves into the most stable faction of Oregon, puppeteering some of the offices by dancing the concept of power over their head. They're able to force a coup targeting pro-Onishi offices. Ichise survives one of these attacks, meant to destabilize Onishi's office, and is tasked with killing one of the anti-Onishi heads. He delivers swift vengeance, but it's not enough to curve what's been set into motion. The class prince has descended down the hill to personally revamp Oregon. Delivering an egocentric monologue speaking to his insanity, he tells the paralyzed Onishi his lack of ego, his aversion to inserting emotion into his leadership, will be his downfall. His professionalism, while perfect for leading a group on set principles and values, does not offer the chance for evolution and change as Kano seeks, which is exactly why he'll cut him out. He has appointed an arrogant office head as the new Oregon leader, a puppet for the class. Oregon no longer has the future of Lux in mind. Now it only ushers in the end of the established order. The pro-Onishi offices withdraw from Oregon, uniting together. Onishi deals with the diplomatic issues, while Ichise is tasked with protecting the Great Father, having a hunch the class will attempt to kill what stands as the true head of Oregon, knowing he'll side with Onishi. They send the ghosts to eliminate all who stand in the way of class rule, armed with plasma cannons which annihilate all matter they come in contact with. These things are dehumanizing. Though they may still bleed as we do, their movements are more animatronic. Yet in the age of mechanical warfare, bodies of flesh cannot stand up to lifeless steel. Ichise is able to protect the Great Father only thanks to his Techhnolyze limbs and fighting experience. They retreat to the train station. The Great Father pushed to seek asylum in the mountains of Gabe. The founder begs Onishi to forsake Oregon and leave with him, but it seems that's something he's incapable of doing. Despite Oregon only existing for the convenience of ruling, to Onishi, it stands as a testament to the hope that order will persevere over chaos. He continues to collect the remaining forces who still believe in the Oregon's vision. The ghosts, while a fitting title, are more than what meets the eye. They're phantoms of what once were. Man turned machine, their vital organs stuffed into a cocoon sitting at the center of their bodies, faces covered by metallic helmets. These lost souls looking for new purpose, founded in becoming the army for the class. fitted with bodies that made them a shape no longer human. They're given the fitting title, Shapes, the mechanical army of the class, a new species of man. Hal has become one of these soldiers. As he promised Shinji, he comes to the dragon's den looking to kill him. Hal believes through joining the ranks of the class and receiving this mechanical form, he has achieved greater freedom, though these words ring hollow on Shinji's ears. The man before him sacrificed his body and soul to a group built upon rule and submission. The class has instilled chains on him through the metal that is now his body. A soldier is nothing more than a pawn and a prisoner to his leaders. Hal is less free than he was before. He attempts to use this new strength of his form to kill Shinji and justify his beliefs. But while he may have the upper hand at first, a flaw in Hal shows itself. He still holds on to his identity, refusing to mask his face while fighting Shinji, and this bare flesh is a weakness. Shinji plunges the one part of him that's metal, an index finger, into Hal's left eye. Despite sacrificing a majority of the body that made him human, he still held on to the one part that maintained his identity. The pressure towards war has skyrocketed yet again. The Union will not bend to this new mechanized rule. Genji takes the stage, coming clean of the dark secret of his past. He tells his comrades the rumors of his technolization are true. Before he had founded the Salvation Alliance, he had his arm replaced with metal, but it is through this surgery he realized the evil of technolization. For not only did it affect his body, causing some kind of rejection of the foreign object, it affected his mind, his soul, and spirit too. The metal took something from him, a piece of his humanity, and he knew that he must prevent others from falling to his same fate. He tells his comrades, if they are wavered in light of this, they can walk away from their battle here today, but not a soul moves to the door. They begin their chant, carrying the weight of preserving humanity into battle. The Union wages war in the streets of Lux, fighting the shapes that once were flesh like them. To their side come the remnants of Organ, but their bodies of flesh cannot outmatch the shapes. As their numbers draw thin, Onishi feels it best they retreat to fight another day, but Genji refuses to back down. He pushes ahead alone, fighting off shapes even after he's been depraved with the strength in his metal hand. But the technolized arm was not what provided this human the strength to wage war. It is his unwavering belief in his mortal shell, that he can fight these monsters with the hands he was born with. Genji falls to the shapes, but while the Organ begin their retreat, the Union forces refuse to run. They die on this battlefield, lying on the same concrete as their fallen leader. The Union's last battle will be remembered as the day humanity shows where its true strength lies. Missing from the battlefield, Ichise was instructed with retrieving Kamata for their move to the mountains of Gabe. Kamata, tired of everything, admits to Ichise that she lied about putting the remains of his mother in his arm. The tiny vial he had carried like a family treasure that contained her remaining cells was discarded. She had only told him this as it was the only way he'd come to accept his new limbs. If he wouldn't take care of his self, then, with the thought of his mother residing in his arm, at least he'd take care of that part of him. Ichise is left in a state of shock, snapping back to the mindset we first met him in momentarily. He once again slams his fist into the wall in defiance of it, but unlike the man he used to be, he's able to reel himself back to reality. This arm he has relied on, this leg he stands on, he can't outright deny them of their purpose. They serve as extensions of his body, whether he acknowledges them as a true part of himself. Kamata asks Ichise to come with her to Gabe, to leave this city to its destruction. Ichise desires to look for Ran, to save her from the violence, but there's a task waiting for him in the hills he can't ignore. As Ichise travels beyond the crumbling concrete jungle, Lain enters Lux. Lain puts her hopes into Onishi, becoming one with the city through the obelisk at its center. She becomes the voice of Lux, yet again, the voice Onishi treats as God. Her body stands before the people immobile. They're mesmerized by her ability. As the shapes run down the remaining defiers to their rule, Kano shifts his focus to calming unrest. The people of Lux unite under principle and value fed to them by people of notoriety. To curb unrest, he must kill Onishi, a man capable of uniting people under the idea of bringing back that which once was lost, which would damn humans to an unchanging society devoid of his sole goal of evolution. Instead, he would use the idea of Ran, whose body has become lifeless, as a puppet to shell his ideals. Through her notoriety as seer, the ignorant will not question her word. The Gabe people, who treat her word as law, proof. Onishi goes to the hills of the class, hoping they may provide some form of support to liberating the city from their prince's iron fists. It's the only hope he has of returning Lux to its original state. But upon arriving there with Shinji, the three elders make no move to reach out a hand. They only offer them passage to the surface to warn them of Kano's final goal. After destroying what remains of Lux and returning it to a land of chaos, he will march his shapes through the tunnels to attack the surface. As Ichise and Kamata arrive the class hills, Onishi offers them up to warn the surface. His place is at the side of his city, fighting for liberation, even if it's futile. Shinji seems uninterested in these goals. After Hao's death, he seems to look at life as devoid of purpose. The Raken are all but destroyed, and his ideals of freedom, well, just as Yoshi said, it wasn't true freedom. But here, in the state of Lux currently, Shinji can live wild, kill without consequence, without a code of honor. Shinji has found the freedom Yoshi spoke of amongst the destruction of society. But he may just find the wild lifestyle is hollow in fulfillment. The class's elders have met their end to Toyama. The former organ member switched teams to the one that would ensure his survival. Kano offers more power and strength. To a man like Toyama, whose only purpose is to live to see another day, he has no problem betraying those around him. He begins his march to the surface, as Ichise and Kamata realize the true nature of the world above ground. These people are not any more human than the shapes they once called ghost. The surface dwellers have strange forms. They feel holographic in a sense. They meander about their lives like phantoms, waiting for death to come. These people call themselves theonormals. They use projections of themselves to go about life, while their true bodies lie in wait for the end. This technology was created to allow them to go about their days free of the danger of accidental death. But this revolution brought an unseen predicament. In the face of minimal danger to their lives, they forgot the purpose of protecting them in the first place. They stopped having children, stopped advancing civilization. The world as a whole came to a stagnation. Theonormals tell Kamata and Ichise they don't really care about the impending danger Kano and the shapes hold. Whether they make it to the surface and kill them or fail to arrive, none of it really matters. Where once there was a quest to evolve into a greater species, now is an acceptance of the death of their kind. Kamata's research, raffia, technolization, none of it is of interest to the Theonormals anymore. The hope they sent the people to Lux with has been long forgotten. At this point, they only wish to die out. Kamata has a hard time accepting this, and while Ichise desires to return to Lux, as even though it's an imperfect town full of violence and chaos, at least there, people have will to live, even when faced with a loss of purpose. But Kamata has given up and tells Ichise he must go alone. She's already more ghost than human. Her drive to live is long gone, and so she chooses death as her escape from dread. Ichise is headed off by Toyama and a band of shapes at the Tunnel Deluxe. Their advancement to the surface was prevented by Tatsuya, who had guided Kamata and Ichise to the surface, collapsing the tunnels. These four are the only ones who will make it this far. Toyama kills the soldiers with him, wishing to face Ichise alone as an equal. He tells the man he truthfully likes him, but the class had offered him a greater chance at survival, one that he could not refuse. The two former friends fight, Toyama falling to Ichise's superior ability. He dies brandishing a smile, glad Ichise, a man stronger than him, was the one who brought him death. With the tunnels collapsed, he must find a new way downward. Tatsuya had also blown the staircase he and Yoshi used to navigate down to Lux. However, the hole isn't entirely impossible to descend. Attached to a rope, Ichise repels into the darkness, back to a place still teeming with life. However, the life left is deprived of what we would call humanity. The obelisk is the conduit for all that is Texhnolyze, to power their limbs, or in the case of the shapes, their bodies. This monument must continue to emit energy. But since the time Ichise left, and Nan had fully gave her consciousness to the pillar, she had shut off all but a fraction of its energy. Thus the shapes lost their ability to move. The people's Texhnolyzed limbs became slow and rigid. The lights that once lit the sky of Lux to mimic daytime had also ceased its cycle, the town now forever in darkness. The beast within the Lux people, once more brimming to the surface, the townsfolk now act as savages, assaulting women, killing children. Nothing here remained that marked this city as once civilized. Some still held on to their sanity, Onishi, thanks to his strong sense of stability and order, has maintained a sense of himself. But even he struggles to keep what was underneath at bay. He stands before the pillar, asking the city what it is he should do. Lain answers him, begging to be killed. He abides these words, piercing his blade into the obelisk. Blood spews from the cracks. The savage Lux people behind him open fire, until nothing remains of the organ leader but the metal legs he once stood on. Ichise witnesses this all, and in grief at the loss of the man he once looked up to, he becomes one with the city, painting its concrete streets with bloodshed and carnage. The sheer numbers overpower him, his barely functioning leg and arm acting as a handicap. He looks down at his technolyzed arm, questioning why his body refuses to answer his will. For the first time, Ichise acknowledges these metal ligaments as truly parts of his body. With this statement, they respond better than before, balling his fist into a hand, delivering high-velocity kicks. He attacks the savage citizens. It seems Kamata was not bluffing when she called his technolization the new form of humanity. Here, in the ruins of Lux, Ichise shows us a new kind of future for humanity, but one that may burn out quicker than the sun. Heavily injured, yet successful in avenging the fallen, Ichise sets out to confront Kano, while Shinji becomes the man Yoshi had hoped he'd become. Pressing forward to the hills, with the ambition to end the lives of those trying to chain Lux down, keep them from unchecked freedom, Shinji will create the grandest spectacle of carnage, eliminating the remains of the class as he kills off the specimens of the class interbreeding. Kano's right-hand man puts down the stray dog, before taking his own life in suit, his job complete. Lain had spoken with Kano leading up to her final moments. They spoke of the man's unchecked insanity, his belief that Lux was actually a part of his mind, its people toys for him to play with. His warped ideals scream as side effects from being specially bred for kingship by the class. He's been treated like the god of Lux his entire life, and he began to believe that, but his kingdom only expanded so far, and his body only allowed him to do so much. Thus, the pursuit of expansion and evolution sunk its teeth into his mind. As Ichise walks through the streets, the shapes stand rooted to the ground, alive, but incapable of movement. Yet still, their ability to think remains. Meeting Kano, he explains these shapes will stand rooted for eons, until eventually they, along with him, will evolve into something beyond what is human. In a way, the Theonormal's ambitions of the people of Lux finding a way to transcend came true. It just so happened, by the time it was possible, they no longer had interest in continued life. And what good would the fate of the shapes do? A prison to their cybernetic bodies, locked in place with only the thoughts in your mind to keep you company. Surely you'd go insane. As decades passed, what remains of yourself may dwindle. How many years will pass before they can no longer remember their names, or the ones they used to break bread with? One of the shapes describes this state of Lux as that of the reviving hell within Buddhism, a place souls reside, dead yet constantly alive, forever caught in the cycle of battle, revived each time they fall to die once more. A time will come when they're capable of thought, but not a thought comes to their minds. Maybe Kano's belief is they'll evolve through forced imprisonment of the mind, but who's to say? All Ichise knows is that the man before him is the one responsible for the deaths of the people in his life he had come to grow fond of. He once thought these emotions of attachment were lost, the death of his parents damning him to the life of a stray prize fighter, only meandering through life, but slowly people gave him a newfound purpose, a sense of duty. Kamata, Nan, Onishi, Kano stands before him, telling him that avenging Nan, whose head he displays like a trophy behind him, will not change the future. Killing him will not bring anyone back, yet Ichise still sees it as his duty to kill the tyrant. Gravely injured from his battles, Ichise wanders the streets, reflecting on his life choices. He believes he's changed as a person over the time we've followed him, and we know that to be true. The man before us, while still expressing his rage through his fist, there is a sense of duty behind each punch, a reason to his violence that wasn't there before. He sinks to the ground against a pillar, overlooking the wreckage that remains. The fates of the Lux people, the shapes, the Theonormals, all speak of different extremes, each ending with a hollow existence. The Lux live wild and free, yet they are savage, incapable of coexisting, held back by their cravings of blood and death. Despite their chaotic nature, unchecked by order, they are not truly free. The shapes, in pursuit of strength and superiority to the common man, sacrificed the bodies of flesh that let them feel warmth. They gave their humanity and bodies to achieve greater freedom, but now they are prisoners to these metal vessels. They too are not truly free. The Theonormals, who sought comfort and a way to protect themselves from harm by projecting themselves to avatars, gave up the danger and wild nature that humans originally had. In this pursuit to protect their lives, they lost sight of why they should protect them. Slaves to the existence of living, they stopped truly living and became phantoms, waiting for the end of their species. They too are not free. But before us, a boy who accepted the part of him that was violent and irresponsible, accepted the evolution that new technology brings to us through his limbs, accepted the part of him that craves comfort, that craves the love of others. Ishise has found the closest thing to freedom there is. He's an animal, but he's also capable of greater thought than any other living being. He likes the comfort of the day-to-day normality, yet he also accepts the changing ways of life that technology offers. These contradictions allow Ishise to not be a slave to ideologies. He lives his life his own way, not by a standardized set of principles. He acts how he feels and leaves it at that. It's not so much about what you choose to live your life by, what duty or purpose give you meaning, than it is about living to simply live and experience what the world around you has to offer. Ishise lives to simply live, to enjoy the things life has, and dies in that very same way, overlooking a holographic flower in his final moments, dreaming of new beginnings, of new possibilities, as death takes his soul.